Hello and what's up everyone, Thunderbob here, and tonight I am playing some more Diablo 2 Resurrected. What I'm doing tonight is taking a look at a couple of popular sorceress builds. So I've been running on Battle.net a Firewall Orb build, and a build that's focusing primarily on Firewall and secondary into Orb. I've had a lot of people recommend similar builds focusing on Firewall, but putting more of a focus on Orb, meaning getting the synergies for Orb, or actually dropping Orb altogether and going Blizzard Firewall. So what I want to do tonight is take a look at two builds. I'm going to look at the Blizzard Firewall build, I'm going to look at the Orb-focused Firewall build, and compare how these run, and I might change my Battle.net character based on that. I am playing on single player so that I have unlimited tokens and that I can tweak my gear a little bit. But this character that I put together is pretty close to my online character. There's a couple of things I don't have online that I have on this character, but I'll go quickly through the gear. I've got the Oculus, which I'm using online, Shaco, which I'm using online. I got the three-piece Talrasha, which I also have online at this point. Spirit, though this one is a perfect Spirit, I have a 33% online. I'd rather like that online, actually. War Travelers, Mage Fist. The biggest difference is I've got a couple of Fire Skillers with life on them, which are rather high-end, but I just needed the plus skill. I wanted a few more plus skills. I've got the Hellfire Torch and Annihilus, of course, which I don't have online. But this gear is attainable. There's no high runes in any of it. My mercenary does not have infinity. I've got insight, and then just what I'm using online, basically. Yeah, so it's not... There's some high-end gear here, but it's not GG, like impossible to find high rune gear, I would say. This is pretty close to where I'm at online, actually, after, 5 weeks of playing. So it's not an impossible build. I'm going to first show off the Blizzard Firewall setup, and then when I switch to the other build, I will focus on that. The gear's going to stay the same between both of these, though. But basically, for this build, you max Blizzard, you max Glacial Spike, and Ice Blast. You don't end up putting any points into that final synergy. At least you don't at this level. I'm at level 90 on this character. From there, I maxed Firewall, and then I put 1 point into each of these. And then once you do that, you kind of have some choices. You can start maxing Ice Bolt, or you can take those points and put it into to make your Firewall a little bit stronger. I ended up putting them into Warmth. I went back and forth a couple of times, and actually, at this level of plus skill points, it was beneficial just to put all my base points into Warmth. I was getting more Firewall damage with the Warmth points than Fire Mastery. I know there's some calculations out there to determine what's best, but when you have a lot of plus points, actually, sometimes it's better to put it into the synergy than into the main mastery, just the way the calculation works. There's some smarter people than I that have made videos to show off this. I would take a look at those calculations, or I would dump this into a skill calculator, or in single player where you can play around with some tokens to figure out what your max damage is going to be. And then, of course, for all these builds, you're going to have one static, one TK, one teleport. What I plan on doing tonight is I'm going to run a couple of things, Baal and Cows primarily, Baal to show how this works on kind of boss runs, and Cows just to show how the builds work on high density mobs, and we'll just move on from there. I will also have this character available for download. My previous single player videos, I've started to host those characters so people can try them out. In my stash, I've got some Cold Skill Charms, I've got some tokens for doing resets. I get the rest of the Talrasha set if you want to test that out. If you do try it out and you've got any thoughts on it, any ideas, let me know. I've put some thought into this, but I always think that kind of more minds and more brain power can come up with some interesting ideas. So if there's any way to optimize or customize this further, certainly let me know what you think. Okay, so we are going to do Baal, and let's just go ahead and buff up here. Now, I have run this before. This is a single-player character, of course. So, the map is revealed. I'm not map hacking or anything. If I could talk. And it's nice to have Blizzard. I would say I've been running the Frozen Orb Firewall build for a while. And before that, I was a full-blown Blizzard Sorceress. Before that, I was a Meteorb Sorceress. So I've kind of run the whole gauntlet, I would say, of, like, popular builds. And they all, I think, there's not one that's clearly the best. I think they're all, like, some of them are better at certain things than others. I think Blizzard, straight up Blizzard, is great for, like, running cows and running, ancient tunnels and places where there's few immunities. I think this Firewall build is really, really good at running bosses. Like, I haven't killed Mephisto faster with any other build that I've ever run. And the Meteorb, of course, is kind of a mix. Like, it does not quite do as much damage as Blizzard or Firewall, but it's a really fun build to run through the whole game with the first time, where you're not going to run in anything you can't kill, but I think the damage on it is not quite as much as either of these builds. What I'm running on Baal and actually is the Orb Firewall, but I'm going heavier into Firewall. I might change that. That's why I'm doing some of these tests. I want to figure out what's the best variation. No. That triggered him. There he goes. And this is a wave that I had some slowdown with before. I want to see how much more Blizzard does, because these guys have pretty high fire resist. And I would say that's doing better than my Orb was. If I could actually get him in position. And, like, that's where those last 10 or so points I could have, at this level, put them into Ice Bolt to make my Orb even better. Kind of a judgment call. Do you want, a bit more fire damage? Or do you want to focus on your cold damage? I guess, are you killing primarily with Blizzard and using Firewall for your bosses and or immunities, or are you using Firewall more regularly? You have that bug sometimes where you hit your hotkey and it doesn't change. Like right there, I was supposed to Blizzard, but instead it made me teleport. That wasn't the Oculus that time. Damn it. It's the conviction on these guys. And I've got a video up showing my online sorceress that doesn't quite have this level of gear, but it's pretty close. Doing Baal. So if you want to, like, compare how a Firewall Orb with a focus on Firewall does, that video would be maybe worth your time. And then here, like, Firewall, I think is still the way to go on the bosses. As long as you can get them to stand in it. Like, Baal rarely moves from his one spot if you stay, like, kind of in proximity to him. Alright. So now I'm going to do cows real quick on this build. And then I will respec the Orb Firewall build, and we'll do this one more time. Okay, so we're going to do the cow level. And I'm not going to do, I think, like a whole cow level. I just want to kind of demonstrate how each build handles, like, large crowds of enemies. Like, I know Blizzard is probably going to be the winner here. Orb just isn't as effective at these kind of situations, I find. With really, really high-end gear, it can work. You know, if I threw on Death Fathoms, if I threw on, like, Nightwing's Veil, that kind of thing. But even then, Blizzard would also benefit from those items. And my Blizzard here's doing 4,600 damage, which was pretty close to, like, what my fully spec'd Blizzard was doing. Just because I've got better gear here than I did when I was running Blizzard online, like, 3 weeks ago. And, you know, I would primarily be using Blizzard and using Firewall only when, you know, I've got immunities to deal with. Firewall does a lot of damage, but positioning is, like, so critical on it. Like, you know, if you can get an enemy to stand still in it, but, you know, they move is the problem. So if you can get them to focus on your merc, it works pretty well. I've actually done full runs with my Firewall source. And while it's not, you know, as effective as Blizzard, you can make it work. Especially if you have a merc that can hold his own. But the problem is if he can't, and you gotta, like, keep teleporting him out of there. And then you would probably just benefit more from using your cold skills here. It's just so much easier to let them pass through it. What I was doing online was, like, I would get a bunch of cows together, I'd drop a Blizzard, and then, you know, run to the next pack, drop the Blizzard. Usually they would die from that first, and then any stragglers I'd get with one more. Yeah. So, that's, this is the Blizzard Firewall build. I think it's good. I might actually try this out online and see how it fares with my gear. I've got slightly more skill points here. I think I'm at plus 10 online, and I've got, you know, for cold, I've got 15 right now. So, like, this isn't, you know, that much better than what I'm running online. And I keep improving, so, like, I probably will get the couple of missing pieces, you know, in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully before ladder starts, and, you know, with the great servers we've got, who knows when ladder's gonna come out anyways. Alright, I'm gonna switch over to the other build, the Orb Firewall build, and we'll see how it compares. Okay, so now I'm looking at the Orb Firewall build with a little bit more focus on Orb. These are level 90 characters. I don't think I mentioned that before. I didn't go to 99. I wanted to be kind of realistic. Like, I'm actually approaching 90 on Battle.net. That's usually about where I stop. I'm not going to go higher than that. Just it gets so much slower after that. So I'm working with, you know, what's that? With the skills from your request, like 101 skill points, I think. For this one, I've maxed Frozen Orb. I've also maxed Ice Bolt. And I've got enough points in Cold Mastery to hit that negative 100%. You could pump a few more here if you choose. It's kind of your call. I've seen like 130 also called out as being useful. Depends on what you're farming. Like Mephisto has a pretty high cold resistance. Some enemies, you know, you wouldn't get quite as much of a benefit from it, but you could go higher. Frozen Orb doing 700 damage with that skill distribution. One in Frozen Armor again. 3 core lightning skills. From here I maxed Firewall. And at level 90 I had enough points to max Warmth and to start putting points into Fire Mastery. Again, with this level of plus skills, I was finding actually that Warmth was providing me with more damage than Fire Mastery. Even as I was maxing it, I was kind of surprised by that. So definitely check out the skill calculators, or even play around with a single player character and some tokens to find kind of your optimal skill level. It's based on your plus skills. Like, this character has a pretty high number of them, and with enough plus skills, it kind of throws that calculation out of whack. Usually you want your fire mastery to be a few points above your synergy in this case, but I actually found the opposite true with plus 20 something, to all skills. But otherwise, we're going to go through and do Baal again. I just realized they didn't distribute my vitality. And then we're going to do some cows, and I'll kind of have some final thoughts at the end when I see how they both run. Okay, so we're going to knock on Baal's door and see if he's home. Just a real quick kind of reiterate. Firewall dealing 20,000 damage with this Orb Firewall setup. Because you have fewer synergies, fewer points you have to invest in cold with Orb, you can put a little bit more into Firewall. You could also take some of these points and max out Cold Mastery further, kind of a judgment call. You could go up to like 130 on that. Still get benefit from most enemies in the game. Orb is dealing about 700 sheet damage. This is kind of misleading. Orb, the sheet damage in Orb never really that doesn't line up that much with reality, because Orb shoots out a huge amount of ice bolts and has that final explosion. And in my mind, I usually multiply that by about 5 to 10, depending on how well you are targeting the Orb to get what you're really dealing. So this is probably in the same ballpark as the Blizzard damage, based off of 2 instead of 3 synergies. But we'll see how this goes. Oh, I should probably also get all buff here. I hit the gym and get some buffness going. Again, map is revealed because this is single player. Has a lot of dudes right there. I hate when you come in here and it's like, here's every enemy in the game. I'd say Orb's doing pretty well. Got a lot of mix of cold and fire immunes here that we got to deal with. Firewall, you almost kind of just snipe with it. Like, you can just land it on the individual fire immunes. I do that a lot on like the Chaos Sanctuary when you're fighting these Doom Knights and their mage friends. You die. You die. Like, look how fast. As long as they stand still and they don't move, they just instantly die. That took longer than it should have. Guys are spread out so much. It's kind of the problem with Firewall. So dealing with those fire immunes, if they don't want to stick together, it's kind of a pain in the ass. I really love Firewall for bosses in particular. Like, it's the quickest I've ever dealt with, like Mephisto. Quickest you can burn down, I think, Baal when you have it kind of maxed out. And again, you got like these individual little guys doing their thing. You could also just teleport on them and let your mercenary take care of it if you have enough damage. And if you're lucky with Firewall, sometimes you can line that up perfectly. They spawn and literally just instantly die. My favorite thing. This wave, though they're not fire immune, these guys have a pretty considerable amount of fire resistance. And I tend to just use my cold skills on them. which rips through him pretty well. I'd say this might be doing... Like, that felt like it worked better than the Blizzard, actually. If not, at least comparable to it. And of course, these guys are always immune. But if you can get them all bunched up like that, and if nice, they're not dual immune at least. Blister's not. That happens more often than I'd care to... Damn it. I'll have to go get him to deal with the immunity. Something feels a little off. Like, I'm using the same gear on Lion for my Merc. And, definitely not holding up, as well. I'm gonna go ahead and just get him. I'm not sure if it's my imagination, but I definitely feel, he's a little squishier, and I don't know why. Actually, I've got better gear, because, this has higher defense than the one I'm using online. Yeah, I don't know. Actually, I'm using Obedience online, which I do have out here, but I don't want to switch it out in the middle of the run. Yeah, that's pretty close to what I'm using online. Maybe that's enough to keep him alive, I don't know. Yeah. Fairly easy. I'd say comparable to the Blizzard build. Like, maybe Blizzard's doing damage, you know, to a pretty wide area, and you can target it. And yeah, here is where, like, I'm barely doing anything with Orb right now, but if I can get him to stand still and I throw a couple of firewalls out. Watch that. Dead. This firewall, for most of the bosses, is definitely my preferred skill. You know, Blizzard's pretty decent for some, like Mephisto works pretty well. But Firewall burns through, Andariel, Duriel, Baal, just like butter. So next I'm going to do just quick cow killing, just to show how this build works with high density targets, and then we'll kind of do a final wrap up and talk about the builds. And here we go. I think this is where the Blizzard build is probably going to shine. Like, I think Blizzard just does better with huge numbers of targets. You know, your bolts only hit so many targets. They only go so far. They only last so long. Like, with Blizzard, you can throw out Blizzard and kind of kite enemies into it for a prolonged period of time. Some immunities in there. Bratham's not doing too bad, though. And I could also, you know, try to use Firewall here, but it's, the targeting on it is... Like, the damage is fine, as long as you can get an enemy to stay in it at least a second. There's, I got a dual immune there. Yeah, so, like, if they're just walking through it, you might as well not be using it. You really need a Merc that can hold them in place. Or you need to be tanky enough where you can hold them in place. Or trap them in, like, a corner, you know. If I get it to trigger. Let's see if we get some more big groups of them. I think Orb is just easier to use than Firewall. Same thing with Blizzard. I think Blizzard, for large density, definitely my #1 ability, other than, maybe Lightning Fury is a little bit better. Hammers is pretty good too. But Blizzard, very good at killing cows. I'd say outside of like those cow kind of areas, the super high density areas, they're pretty comparable builds. The Orb and the Blizzard, damage, relatively similar at this gear level, at like plus 15 or so skills. You do get some extra points to be able to max out your fire damage. So that's something, to kind of take into consideration. Your fire is a little bit better because you've got a few extra points. I really do think it's, kind of personal preference and also what you're farming, as far as what is better. If you're primarily doing like boss runs, you're doing like quick Mephisto runs, you're doing quick Endariel runs, where you're kind of bypassing a good amount of the enemies. I think a firewall focused build could be effective. I've been running that for a little while. I think if you're doing lots of like, killing large amounts of enemies, then I think it's probably better to to go with either the Orb heavy or the Blizzard heavy builds. I think either can be effective. If you're doing a lot of cow runs, I think Blizzard is kind of a clear choice here, though. Yeah, those are kind of my thoughts. So I think all of them are reasonably good. I may actually end up respeccing online. I'm like the Firewall heavy Orb build. I might end up going with a little bit more into the Orb synergies, seeing how good it is at killing just the standard mobs, and then just use Firewall specifically for my immunes and for bosses. But I'm pretty intrigued by that Blizzard build. I want to play around with it more and see if maybe I can optimize it any further. Yeah, so I think I'm going to end it here. If you have any thoughts, any suggestions, any ways to modify these builds, either through gear or skill distribution, leave me a comment below. I appreciate the feedback. And if you enjoy this video, I have a ton of other Diablo-related content on the channel. If you check it out and you enjoy it, do consider subscribing. I would definitely appreciate it. Again, I do want to thank you for watching, everyone, and have a good night.